Okay, kiddos, so today we're going to learn a little bit about the Cold War. Um, so last time we talked a little bit about communism spreading through Russia, and we're going to talk about how some of that communism spread to other places. But first, I want to show you a little video. As long as it works, of course.
Seven, six, five, four, three, two, one, zero. These are the stakes to make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
So that was a campaign ad back from 1964 from then Democratic President Johnson. And this ad was made during a conflict called the Cold War, which I talked about briefly a little bit earlier. During this time, and we'll talk about why it's called the Cold War later, people were afraid of nuclear attacks, like you saw in the video, and of the people behind these possible attacks, communists. So the Cold War is from 1945 AD to 1991 AD. And we talked previously about how in Russia, communism took hold in the early 1900s through people like Lenin and Stalin, that sort of thing. And after World War II, Russia tried to spread that communism around Eastern Europe and succeeded very successfully in places like Romania, Bulgaria, and other Eastern European countries, Ukraine as well. Actually, not Ukraine, they controlled Ukraine. So the U.S., though, we weren't big fans of that spread of the communism in Eastern Europe and around the world. And our opposition led to the United States confronting the USSR during the Cold War. Now, it's called a Cold War instead of a hot war because we never actually fought the Soviets directly. There was this fear that if we did, it would lead to World War III. We'd fire nukes at them, they'd fire nukes back at us, basically. So we really avoided confronting them directly. So the Cold War was a time not of actual fighting, but a time of tense competition between the U.S. and the USSR. And we competed in lots of different ways, like the space race. We tried to compete, or we did compete for who would put the first satellite into space, which the Russians won that. They put Sputnik back in the 1950s, which caused a lot of people to freak out, us to spend more money on science education so we could beat the Russians. They actually got the first person and animal into space, but we kind of got the big one. We put the first person on the moon, so we did beat the Russians with that. We also competed against them in influence around the world, so trying to make sure more governments were turning towards being democracies instead of communist governments. So in places like Vietnam and Korea, we actually fought actual wars, trying to convince those people to have democracies and not to be communist. Also in the Olympics, if you've ever seen the movie Miracle on Ice, the fact that we beat the Russians was huge. It's be kind of like today if ISIS had a basketball team and we beat them. It's that level of excitement. Now, many people in the U.S. were afraid of communists, hated them. There was a lot of hatred towards communists, a lot of distrust of them. It would be similar today how we strongly dislike the North Korean government and fear them launching nuclear weapons at us, kind of like Trump just the other day went and talked to their leader Kim Jong-un to try and get them to denuclearize, to get rid of their nuclear weapons. or the way we kind of fear and hate extremist Islamic terrorists like ISIS and that sort of thing. Now, in popular culture, do a little bit of American history here. In popular culture, Americans were often shown competing against Russians. TV shows, movies, and literature. If you've ever seen any of the James Bond movies, a lot of the plots in those movies during the Cold War, so 45 to 1991, so for him, 60s to 91, showed him trying to foil plots by the Russians or trying to keep nuclear bombs out of the hands of people who might get them from Russia, that sort of thing. In fact, there's a movie called From Russia with Love, where James Bond goes and is working against the communists. Or if you've ever seen the Rocky and Bullwinkle or heard of that, the villains in that are Russians, very much a sign of the times. So we're to show that point a little bit better. We're going to take a look at a movie trailer that was made during the Cold War, and I want you to tell me how you know. Okay, so how you know, and you might want to pause this to write the question down. How can you tell this movie trailer was made during the Cold War? So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
Today, the Soviet Union has officially entered professional boxing.
This is not just an exhibition fight, but this is us against them.
He would like to compete against anyone who is qualified.
Drago is the most perfectly trained athlete ever. Whatever he hits, he'll be strong.
He could have stopped the fight. He could have saved his best friend's life.
I'll never forget you, Apollo.
But now, the one thing he can't do is walk away.
Has the fight date been set yet?
December 25th.
Where?
It's in Russia.
Are you nuts? Miss Balboa, when will you be going to Russia?
I'm not going to Russia. I don't know what you're talking about.
He's had one professional fight, and one man is dead.
Tabibi, he's gonna have to kill me.
Why can't you change your thinking?
Because I'm a fighter.
You can't win!
Rocky IV.
So in class tomorrow, I'll be looking for those answers to that question. How can you tell from this video that this was made during the Cold War? And that's it, kiddos.